A very good morning and many thanks for staying with us on the #1 TV station, and that is none other than NTV Uganda. My name is Romy Busiko, and of course I come to you with a very pertinent conversation and a $64,000 question. We are going to be exploring, should young people in this country be having access to contraceptives? It's a no-brainer. Remember the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. We could only guess and say, now that every young girl is at home within the home setting and living with unscrupulous individuals or members of the community, we could only anticipate that there could be an unprecedented baby boom where, young mothers, teenagers and so forth are getting engaged in sexual activities that led to many of the teenage pregnancies taking center stage during the onset of the first lockdown. Now we are not guessing anymore. We know for a fact that many of the young women have found themselves in a mind-boggling situation where they do not have access to contraceptives, hence the burgeoning teenage pregnancies that we've been seeing, many of whom have actually been married off at a very young age. We are not leaving that to any chance. The second lockdown, that's why we are here to expand more on why young people should be having access to contraceptives. We do have Charles Musana. He is the Public Relations Officer working with the National Population Council. He's not alone. We are also having RHU Rimpa. She is the Manager Safe Motherhood working with Reproductive Health Uganda. We also have the Executive Director of Reproductive Health Uganda, Mr. Jackson Chekweko. He also joins us right now in studio. And via Zoom from Fort Portal, we shall be talking to a youth focal person, and that's none other than Miss Claire Kagaju. There she is, very beautiful. She'll be talking to us about how young people are grappling to access contraceptives during this COVID-19 lockdown, the second COVID-19 lockdown. So let me start with RHU Rimpa, the Manager Safe Motherhood with Reproductive Health Uganda, to paint for us a picture of the plight that young people are going through, especially when it comes to accessing contraceptives during the second COVID-19 lockdown that we are grappling with right now. Very good morning, lady and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Let me start with you, RHU Rimpa. Please, let's start with a situation analysis of how we got here.
Okay. Thank you very much, Romeo, and good morning, listeners. I've been introduced. I'm RHU Rimpa. I work with Reproductive Health Uganda as the manager for Safe Motherhood projects. Why are we here today? We are discussing a very pertinent topic, but also very sensitive. When you talk about contraceptives for young people, quite a number of individuals, families, religious leaders are like, oh, is this the right topic to talk about? But given the current situation and circumstances, Uganda has one of the highest teenage pregnancies in the world. Every 1 in 4 young persons is pregnant, or she is a mother. And this definitely means that young people are sexually active. And if they are sexually active, then how do we prevent the unwanted, unplanned, and unintended pregnancies? So it's well that we come to terms and very practical with what the nation is facing. If you have young people getting pregnant, there's no way you're going to continue burying your heads down and stop talking about issues of contraceptives. So we have a very high teenage pregnancy, and we are here to basically face the reality of teenage pregnancies in the country. Everybody keeps talking about a young population.
Indeed.
And indeed,
The second youngest in the world.
The second youngest in the world, but also growing very fast in terms of multiplication of the population. Yeah, so there's a lot that we need to talk about. Now, I want us to basically discuss why are we having this continued kind of situation without making good progress. One of the key factors that we have been faced with, not only as Uganda, is the COVID pandemic. Young people are home, and the lessons we learned from the very first lockdown is that we had quite a number of districts reporting high teenage pregnancies. We used to see the headlines. So many head teachers were asking themselves, shall we have the young girls in schools after the lockdown? Because they had seen quite a number of girls.
Over 5,000 in Kabale. You didn't imagine 5,000 young girls getting pregnant.
Exactly. So, and when the schools opened up last year, quite a number of schools registered a lower population of girls at the beginning of the terms. especially starting with the candidate classes. And it was very clear. Some of them were pregnant. Some of them had challenges due to poverty-related factors. And quite a number of girls were not able to go back to school because they had sexual and reproductive health challenges. Now, again, the issues about pregnancy brings up other sexual and reproductive health matters related to sexually transmitted infections, including HIV, hepatitis B, and many others. But also, it carries other issues that we don't normally talk about, for example, unsafe abortions in the country amongst the young people. And one thing leads to the other. So if you look at the cycle, it's one thing basically leads to the other. And before you know it, the girl child takes a big kind of percentage of the burden of the sexual and reproductive health challenges. Now, if you're looking at, again, matters related to health, they are closely related to socio-economic factors that we shall continue to struggle with as a country.
Indeed.
Yes. If this girl is pregnant and she's going to give birth to a child, in her capacity, will she be able to take care of this child? Most times not. They still look up to family members, friends, and other people to support them.
So as we look at a group of vulnerable people out there who might need help, we should look at child-headed families.
Exactly. Child-headed families, but also the young mothers. How are we going to support them?
Indeed.
Yeah, so it's not only about the baby boom, but the babies that have come to us. Yeah, but also the babies born to young mothers suffer quite a number of health-related issues.
Indeed.
Young girls are likely to give birth to preterm babies. The babies born to young mothers are also likely to face challenges related to care and support, including breastfeeding. If this girl is not well supported, she will not be able to breastfeed. And then other diseases like malnutrition will set in. So it's quite a complex situation that we must all stand up for. We must all be able to face the challenges ahead of us and face them using multi-sectoral approach.
Indeed.
The religious sector, the cultural and traditional barriers must be addressed. The health systems challenges need also to be addressed. Young people are home, but how well are the parents engaging with the children in matters related to sexual and reproductive health? So I think given this kind of situation, we need to face it without mincing any words.
Indeed.
But also being very practical in the solutions that we'll be discussing.
Annette Charimpa, she is actually the Manager of Safe Motherhood at Reproductive Health Uganda. Let's also bring in the Executive Director, Reproductive Health Uganda. That's none other than Mr. Jackson Chikweko, to talk about the low access to contraceptives. Mr. Jackson, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected the ongoing low access to contraceptives in Uganda?
Yeah, thank you, Ronnie.
Indeed.
My name again is Jackson Chikweko from Reproductive Health Uganda. In the current times of the pandemic,
Indeed, sir.
And specifically the second wave, we have to draw experiences from the first lockdown. And one of the immediate challenges which young people have, first of all, the lockdown has disrupted the information flow.
Indeed.
Most of the young people have been accessing information through peer-to-peer. Now, people are not visiting each other. If they are doing it in a very minimal scale. Two, we used to reach out to young people through outreaches. You go organize a youth function out there, bring service providers. There is people giving information here, and there are the service providers giving information here. Right now, you cannot conduct an outreach because people cannot congregate. The other way was the young people coming to the facilities, coming to the health facilities. I must say that government deliberately facilitated facilities to continue working. But the young people are having challenges reaching the facilities. One of the biggest challenges is that issues of family planning is not an emergency in this country.
Which is a mistake.
Okay, they look at you as healthy. So even when they want to go, they will reach the roadblock and they will say, I want to go to the facility, but they say, how? You are lying. So they are stopped.
You're in great
at the
condition,
roadblock.
please go back home.
Go back home. And you can imagine, we are just persuading these young people to get used to getting access. But here, you are the one again, as government, stopping them. That is why the message is, can government treat family planning, access to family planning, as equally like they are treating somebody who is suffering from malaria or who is sick? Because access to family planning, if we want to avoid another baby boom, actually we should be out there telling young people, go for services, because they are now at home. Both the boys and the girls are at home. They mix. They are not in school, which was a conducive environment. So that is another one. The other one is that, of course, the lockdown has also punched holes in people's pockets. The parents and also the young people alike. Now, the females who have more needs, they need to have pads, they need to do what? They will want to look for ways of getting money. And that increases their vulnerability. In the process, they get into unhealthy relationships, and that leads them to having sex, and what follows?
Indeed.
Unplanned pregnancies, sexually transmitted infections, and we are not even talking about HIV, who is just sleeping there but attacking people right now as we speak. So that is some of the challenges we are facing. But we need to reverse this. And we are using this after meeting of the National Population Day to say, as a country, we need to support young people. Men out there, they need to support their partners. If you can afford to have a female partner, be prepared to support her to reach the access.
Of course, if you help young teenagers avoid pregnancies, you're actually reducing maternal mortality rate in this country. 336 mothers die during pregnancy out of every 100,000 live births, meaning you're trying to avoid a bigger problem in the near future. Let's also bring in Mr. Charles Musana, the Public Relations Officer for the National Population Council. Well, let's talk about poor access to sexual reproductive health services. Is it to blame for the, I wouldn't say unprecedented baby boom, because we saw this coming in the first lockdown. So here we are. Do you think the poor access to sexual reproductive health services might continue to see a baby boom that has kicked off since the onset of the pandemic last year? Continuation of the suffering.
Thank you so much, Romeo. Good morning, patrons, and thank you for having us on this show.
Indeed.
Romeo, despite the hardships brought on board by the COVID-19 pandemic, I want to bring you warm greetings from National Population Council.
Indeed.
And thank you for that question. I'm happy that you've granted us this time to come and discuss this very important topic, because for us at the Council, we believe that young people have the right to lead healthy lives, and if they are to lead healthy lives, they need the tools that are going to enable them lead these healthy lives.
In a planned
You
way.
see, we have a problem in this country where we think we should not be discussing contraceptives for young people. But as you've heard from Jackson and Annette, 1 in every 4 of our young girls becomes pregnant before the age of 19. And you've heard the challenges that come with that. So it's very important, and we understand this as government, that young people need to have the right information before they even start having sexual activities. And then secondly, they need to understand the different methods of family planning. They need to know where to go in case they want these services.
Indeed.
And then they need support and encouragement from their peers, from adults, from the educators, and from health providers to give them the comfort to demand and access family planning services. And then also, very importantly, they need quality services that are confidential, that are safe, and that are conducive. Now, going back to your question, I will say that many factors have contributed to the baby boom.
Indeed.
We will not run away from the elephant in the room, that as a matter of fact, our contraceptive prevalence rate is still quite low at about 38%. And then as a country, we also have a very high rate, the unmet need for family planning is also still very high at 28%, meaning there are many women and men, many young girls in this country who are already convinced of the importance of contraceptives, but they cannot access them. But as government, we are doing all that we can to ensure that we bring down the unmet need for family planning. And then the other challenge I would briefly want to talk about is access to education. Because if you keep girls and boys out of school, what are they going to do? They are going to get married, and that will lead to teenage pregnancies. So government is establishing schools in all sub-counties to take education closer to the people. We are running programs that are encouraging girl-child education for girls to stay in school for more than 13 years, and we hope that those programs will help address the challenge of I don't want to call them early marriages, I want to call them child marriages and teenage pregnancies.
Indeed.
Thank you.
So what can government do in the interim, because now largely all our children are back home? So what are we doing to safeguard them from the home setting?
Romeo, the responsibility of taking care of children
The parent.
cannot solely be put on government. No, government has a role to play, but to start with, the families, the parents, we should be responsible, we should take care of our children, and we should ensure their safety during the lockdown. Now, moving that a notch higher, we look at the community. As communities, what systems are we putting in place to safeguard our children? And then, beyond that, that's when we move on to look at government. And government has many aspects of working on this. On top of the programs, we have laws that were put in place. We have policies, we have strategies that are aimed at protecting our children. Are they being implemented? So those are some of the questions that
and
we
Jackson
should be asking.
says it's the same government that is frustrating the youth's efforts to actually access contraceptives. When they reach the blockades or the police roadblocks, they are told go back because you are looking healthy. But they do not know what the problem is. This young person is actually trying to go out there and get some contraceptives. Isn't government actually shooting its own foot in this regard?
I would say yes and no, and yes for the fact that we are currently undergoing a pandemic that is unprecedented.
Indeed.
You understand? There's a bit of confusion in how the SOPs are being implemented. But I want us to understand that it's the same government in 2014 that developed the National Adolescent Health Policy to mainstream adolescent health issues in development processes.
But that same law, Charles Musan, has not been implemented over the years.
Yes, we will get to the implementation, but at least we have put up the frameworks.
Yes,
In
the structures.
2011, we put up the National Adolescent Health Strategy, and then in 2018, we put up the National Sexuality Education Framework.
Both of whom are not being implemented.
Yes, there are challenges of implementation. There are challenges of people coming out to say, why do you want to teach our children about ABCD? But the truth is, as Annette said, if 1 in every 4 girls in this country gets pregnant before they are 19, then we should accept the fact that many of our young girls and boys are involved in sexual activity. And if they're involved in sexual activity, we should not run away from the fact that for those who are sexually active,
this is what you do.
Yes, they should be allowed to do what? To access contraceptives. And then for the young ones who are not yet sexually active, we should be giving them age-appropriate information that is culturally and religiously sensitive, information that is going to enable them make informed decisions and safe life choices. Thank you.
Charles Musana is a public relations officer working with the National Population Council. He is not alone. We also do have Mr. Jackson Chekweko, the ED, Executive Director, Reproductive Health Uganda. In the middle right there, we have Annie Charimpa. She is the manager, Safe Motherhood, still working for Reproductive Health Uganda. Why speculate when we do have a youth focal person within our midst? She's joining us via Zoom, and that's none other than Claire Kagaju. A very good morning, Claire Kagaju. Talk to us about some of the problems you've encountered when it comes to accessing contraceptives during this COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes,
I'm not just going to put it onto this lockdown, but the whole COVID-19 pandemic. Go ahead.
I hope you can hear me.
I do.
Yes. One thing I would like to tell you is that the youth in this lockdown, the first thing we noticed, last Tuesday we had a meeting with all the youth leaders in the country, and we wanted to see how we can continue to give these services to people. Another thing I want to first address is that young people in Uganda are, for us in Reproductive Health Uganda, start from 10 to 24 years, and we advise that they should access the contraceptives without any judgment, whether young, single, or married. Another thing is we are trying to do this because in the first wave of lockdown, we had a lot of unwanted pregnancies. Like one of the speakers said, 1 out of 4 girls in this country were getting pregnant. So we sat down and we're like, this second wave of lockdown has come. How should we continue to access all this? We came up with social media. Then we also came up with radio talk shows. We do talk shows. We have partnered, for us in Fort Portal, we have partnered with a lot of organizations, such as the Sensitive Needs. They give us time, they give us airtime for us to air out our views. And then we have tried to talk to our religious leaders who are against family planning, and they have actually narrowed down for us some radio talk shows that were not allowing us to talk about family planning to the where they are not allowing us to talk about family planning because they thought these children were so young, but now they can allow because they've seen what has happened. We are trying to prevent unwanted pregnancies and abortions because this has led to a lot of deaths in our country. So it has been hard because morally people think it is not appropriate for us to talk about family planning, but on ground, our children are exposed via social media or other ways. And then also we get misinformation about family planning. For example, me as a youth, I can say most of my fellows have not been okay with coming to the clinic for services. They usually go to the internet, and the internet can also misguide us. So in my view, we have over narrowed down, like the ED said, we used to go to field, we talk to people, we ease these things down. And now that we can't access people physically because of this pandemic, we have resorted to social media. We have a chatbot at RHU. Okay, we have podcasts that have started. They started recently. We have radio talk shows. So yeah, for us here, it has been easy for us to communicate. Then the numbers of people coming to our facility here in Fort Portal have also increased. And yeah, during this lockdown, this second wave, it has reduced the young people who have been getting at the clinic have only been being brought in by their parents, not them willingly.
Claire Kagaju would also like to know, has poor sexuality education compounded the problem that we are seeing, the low access to contraceptives within this Uganda? The fact that many young people do not know better or do not have information at all on the same. Poor sexuality education, has it played a role?
Pardon, I didn't get you.
Has poor sexuality education played a role in the low access to contraceptives here in Uganda? Claire Kagaju, the fact that many young people do not know better, that if I have sex with person X, I should be looking for some kind of help, maybe a pill to help me alleviate that problem, not to get pregnant. Sexuality education.
Yeah, sexuality education, sexuality is not just about, say, the intercourse, it's about the whole education of our system. Boys being taught this and this happens to girls, girls being taught this and this. Some people don't, even if we use methods such as withdrawal, there is a chance of being pregnant. To me, the best sexuality advice a parent can give out to the children is abstinence, because our young people 10 to 24 are so exposed. And if we keep preaching abstinence, I think that it's the best contraceptive to use. And then we also use other methods. However, you have to first go to a health facility so that we recommend you which method to use, because at times there's some that are compatible with the body, others are not.
All right, thank you very much, Claire Kagaji. We shall get back to you to talk about what measures government can put in place to arrest this situation. Thank you very much. She's coming to us live from Fort Portal, shining a light on the plight young people are grappling with during this second lockdown. Let's also bring in Annette Charimpa. Annette, let's talk about that issue to do with the low access to contraceptives, poor sexuality education. Has it played a role?
Yeah, thank you again.
She touted abstinence at some point, but then we are looking at a situation whereby a young girl is defiled against her will. So what do you do thereafter?
Okay. Thank you very much. Again, looking at the situation, girls are getting pregnant while at home. Who is making them pregnant? I think we should also talk about that.
That's a big one.
Okay. Yeah. Statistics have shown that, you know, girls are safe while in school. Now, the children are home where we think the parents are watching them. The parents should be doing their best to make sure that the girls remain safe. But what is coming out is that the girls are getting pregnant. So we need to ask, bring this discussion to the families.
Parents are dropping their guard.
Yeah, preventing unwanted pregnancies, preventing sexual activities within the homestead, probably. Okay, and in some instances, it has also been reported that the guardians, the parents, the cousins are responsible for these pregnancies.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, what kind of discussions are we supposed to have? It's, I think, breaking the barriers to communication within a home to discuss sexual-related issues at homestead. That is sexuality education. Okay, what does a father tell this child? What does the mother tell this child? And most times, because of culture, they would say, it's the auntie to do this, but the aunties are not there because we're in the lockdown. So I think it's time for the parents to be open and to talk about these issues openly, and then build capacity and resilience among the children. Understand that, you know, sexual activity with your father, with your uncle, with your cousin will result into a pregnancy. And how do you prevent this pregnancy? That is the discussion. Now, secondly, we've been reaching out to young people through schools. The schools are closed. I think it's now time for us to have adaptation to the new normal, or to the kind of the situation we are running, we are having, to say, okay, if the children are not in organized settings, the schools and institutions, how do we reach out to them? Let's embrace technology, for example. In communities where we can use WhatsApp groups and other modes of communication, it would be a good opportunity to say, you know, how do we pass on the messages? We are glad we are now talking through this communication channel, the TV, but again, the number of young people watching these programs across the country is also very small. But we have the radio programs and other opportunities to reach out to young people. But what is also very important is that we must link communication to services. Talking without linking young people to services remains a big challenge to young people because of so many challenges in there. We want them to access services, but there are travel restrictions. So how do the providers get to young people, or how do young people get to the providers? We must come up with the links. And one of them is creating space within the public health facilities, creating space within the private facilities, where young people can get additional information. A WhatsApp message might not explain this fully. A young person might not open up fully about their challenge through that kind of forum. But if they have an engagement with the healthcare providers, then it gives them opportunity to explore more about their situation and also get services that they need. There are those that are really very urgent. We are talking about a pregnancy, but quite often it comes also with sexually transmitted infection that need to be treated like immediately when these people get them. So when we talk about contraceptives again, I know to some people, no, this is not a topic that we should not be talking about, but in general, given the current situation that we have already discussed, we must open up. But we also understand that when it comes to passing on information, religious leaders should team us with us and we talk about these issues. Yeah, so those is breaking the barriers of existing and traditional challenges that have basically hampered. Mr. Musana has talked about all these policies. The policies were developed before the pandemic, but what are we going to do now to make sure that the steps, the guidelines, the strategies that are laid in there are adapted to the current situation? I think we all need to move really, really fast and say, okay, if you're talking about a school program, how can we now convert this to a community-led program? We have VHTs in the communities, village health teams. Can we have the VHTs quickly oriented on how to manage young people issues? Because the peer program currently is not functional because of the challenges around, but it would be good. Young people have been getting information from colleagues. The peer educators have been referring their colleagues to the health facilities, but this is not possible with the current situation. So we need to look at the existing structures and how they can quickly adapt to the situation so that we are able to deliver services on time. Otherwise, if we wait too long again, the challenges are going to stay. But I want to emphasize the point that it's the responsibility of parents to make sure that the children get the right information, the children are able to access services, but also to make home a safe place for young people in all matters related to health and access to
Anne
services.
Charimpa is the manager of Safe Motherhood at Reproductive Health Uganda. We also do have Jackson Chekweko, the ED Reproductive Health Uganda. Let's talk about embracing contraceptives, because it is one thing to clamor for access, but then we have individuals within this country who are fighting to close that gap, who are saying we are not embracing these contraceptives. These are the religious leaders. How do we get them on board? And what is the clear role of religious leaders in allowing for this access to contraceptives?
Yeah, thank you again. I want to say that when it comes to ensuring healthy lifestyles of our young people,
Indeed.
a number of stakeholders should play their part. Because we are diverse. And when it comes to young people, they are even more diverse.
Indeed.
We have young people who grow up behind the walls. Your child, the child of Romeo and the child of Annette and Musana. Then you have this.
That child is on a coming soon basis. Go ahead.
Okay. I like that. So we should prepare ahead of time. Then we have this child who has grown in the corridors of Chimumbasa in Boise.
Yes.
Where they grow up seeing all kinds of
ills.
Talk about it. I want to give you an example.
Yes.
I got a shock of my life. I visited one time, I was taking one of my supervisors to where we do work in Boise. And we went to, we call them Moonlight Stars. We went to this home of a sex worker. And business was going right inside the house when the child was outside receiving the guests.
Wow.
Now tell me, how many times will you tell that child about abstinence?
It's the only business she knows.
And makes sense
Quick money.
to her mind. So we are saying we have tasks, we have deliverables for each and every stakeholder.
Indeed.
The religious leaders should continue to reach out to the young people with abstinence messages. Let them be moral, let them seek God. And then stakeholders who access young people with vulnerabilities, with condoms, with family planning methods, they should be allowed to do that. I want to say, actually, the picture is at times misunderstood. There are so many religious leaders who have come on board And they are out there telling Ugandans that embrace family planning.
Indeed.
It was on NTV when we had the Archbishop of the Church of Uganda saying that, look, in this current lockdown, men are at home. They are eating and doing things. Eating and doing things. So to avoid these unplanned pregnancies and whatever, go for modern family planning.
Indeed.
Now, those are the champions.
Indeed.
But we still have religious leaders
Too conservative.
who are still thinking that you can only talk about abstinence. Uganda is metropolitan.
How do I abstain if I've been raped or defiled?
Talk about sexual and gender-based violence. Annette was talking about incest. We are talking about defilement. We are talking about sex for food. We are talking about sex for survival. So we need each stakeholder. And if you cannot cross to support and talk about modern family planning, then you stay on your line.
Jackson
and allow others to continue.
Executive Director, Reproductive Health Uganda, couldn't have said that in a very, very, very great way. Let's also bring in Charles Musana, the PRO National Population Council, to talk about what measures government and civil society can put in place to change this very worrying trend. You can also talk about technology, how we can use technology to bridge that gap and extend sexual reproductive health services to our young people.
Thank you so much, Romeo. I'm going to get to that, and I think this is very important. For us at the Council, there is a concept that we're currently promoting, and it's called harnessing the demographic dividend. It's a strategy that was identified by NDP2 and now NDP3 to enable our country achieve Vision 40. And if we are to harness the demographic dividend for this country, we need to bring down fertility. Now, why is teenage pregnancy a big problem? It's a problem because it's one of the major drivers of fertility in this country.
Indeed.
And if we don't fight it, if we don't bring down fertility, then we are going to miss out on harnessing the demographic dividend.
Because
and
you're talking about 80% of the youth being unemployed in this country. They do not have work. And we're talking about more young children giving birth to other young children who won't be able to take care for or even give jobs.
yes,
Go ahead.
you know, now the problem is that we already have what we call a population momentum. In other words, our population is set to grow, but it's growing at a much faster rate. Our problem is not a big population. No. We're about 43 million people, and that's okay. The challenge is that for a country to develop, the economy should be growing 3 times the rate at which the population is.
Not the other way around.
Yes, and that is what we are trying to address. Now, Annette talked about the challenges that have been brought on board by the pandemic. So, as government, what should be done to address this issue under this
Enlighten us.
pandemic? I think, one, we need to support all health workers to be in position to offer youth-friendly services. She talked about the VHTs. You understand?
Indeed.
We need to orient them on how to become much more youth-friendly. And when each time we talk about youth-friendly services, people think of youth corners with a beautiful TV, with games. Okay, that is okay. But what we want are services that are non-judgmental, services that are respectful, and services that are easily accessible. Now, talk about accessibility under the pandemic. You understand?
Indeed.
Some health center 2s and 3s are far from our communities, and people are now limited. You cannot travel long distances. So we need to promote public-private partnerships to enable people get services closer home at the drug shops that are near home. And then we also need to scale up sexuality education. Currently, the kids are at home. We should encourage the parents to talk about these issues. And then you brought on board a very interesting aspect.
Still on the issue of the parents, before you go to that very interesting aspect, the parents are out there making a living. They are not in the home setting. They will leave the children at home to go out there to see what they can do, even though the lockdown is here. So don't you think the parents might be too busy because of the lockdown to actually talk to the children because they are out there?
Romeo, as I said,
The father is out of the house, the mother is is on a farm.
as I said at the
Yes.
beginning of this program,
Yes, Musana.
we will not run away from facts. By the time you decide to have children, one, you know you have to take very good care of them. It's your responsibility to feed them, to ensure that they are healthy, to ensure that they are clothed, and to ensure that you are giving them guidance. So we shall not say that the parents are busy, because right now as we speak, the kids are at home. It's up to us. They're talking about children who are behind the walls. And you know, the walls may seem as one form of protection, but they are also accessing uncensored content on the internet and the media. So it's your role as a parent. If you don't come in and you think bread is better than guiding your children, then you may have a problem in there. But also,
The interesting bit.
yes, you know, COVID, with all the disadvantages, it has also taught us a new way of doing things. And as a country, I think we should not be lagging behind when it comes to virtual health. How do we move some of these services?
Telemedicine.
Yes, online. That is very important. And at the beginning, Annette talked about multi-sectoral approaches and multi-stakeholder approaches. As government ministries, departments, and agencies, we should be working together to address some of these challenges. And then beyond government, we need better collaborations with the non-governmental organizations, the donors, the development partners, the faith-based organizations, to ensure that we bring on board a change. And lastly, what I've learned this time round, as we commemorate World Population Day, is the fact that we seriously need meaningful youth
All right.
participation.
Charles Musana is the Public Relations Officer for the National Population Council. Thank you very much, sir. Let's also bring in our youth focal person hailing from Fort Portal. Claire Kagaju, are you still with us? I'm sure you can hear me loud and clear. Let's talk about what you think this central government should be doing, you know, in hand with other stakeholders like Reproductive Health Uganda, SRHR, to actually advance sexual reproductive health services to our young people. What should they be doing?
I think the first thing they should do is increase funding, because this country prioritizes, let's say malaria, of course they should, but also family planning. It should be prioritized, because as we've seen in the pandemic, like the former speaker said, our children are behind walls and they're getting uncensored content of the internet. They're getting misconceptions about family planning. So what I think our government should do, it should work hand in hand with IPPF, it should work in hand with Reproductive Health Uganda, so that we can see a way of accessing, of taking this family advocacy to the people down there in the village. For us, what we've tried to do is we've tried to be on social media, because we know most youth be there. We have also tried to get airtime. So if we partner with the government and they get for us airtime on TV, on TVs and radios, so that get those talk shows, it can be easy for us to give this information to the youth, and also work with other stakeholders in our different areas, so that we see how to take these services closer to the young people and to the parents, so that they can give sex education to their children.
Of course, Claire Kagaju, our women and girls being at home means they are not safe. Now, just offer a little bit of advice to some of your peers. What should they be doing, in your perspective, to protect themselves during this lockdown?
Yeah, the first thing I'm going to say is an idle mind is the devil's workshop. So one thing, if in this pandemic we can find ways of being busy, so that we have something to distract us. You can learn a skill, you can work at home, you can help her out with housework. Also, if you are sexually active, you try family planning and also do abstinence. That's my advice.
All right, thank you very much, Claire Kagaju, hailing from Fort Portal. Very, very intelligent young girl. Please keep it up, and also go ahead educating many of your peers to actually abstain if they can. If in the event they've been raped or defiled, they could always run for contraceptives and so forth to avoid pregnancies in that regard. Let me also bring in Annette Charimpa. We are trying to get some recommendations on how to alleviate this problem if it comes again, but it's still here. Annette Charimpa, recommendations from government, civil society organizations on how to curtail this worrying trend.
Yeah, thank you again for the question. And my key recommendations is one, health begins at home. Let's make every single effort to address health-related matters beginning with the households. And this definitely means the young people, the parents have the information. They are empowered to seek services when they need them. And where they need additional support through government structures, then the government should do the role. I've already mentioned adaptation to the system, adaptation to the situation using the current structures and systems.
Indeed.
Yeah, so if we can have the VHT structures improved to address young people's challenges, that would definitely address some of the challenges we are facing with continuity to care.
Indeed. And your message to the young girls who are watching?
Yeah, the young girls, Claire mentioned one thing. Of course, as any parent, I'm a parent, I would encourage abstinence as much as possible.
Indeed.
And beyond abstinence, for those who are sexually active and cannot prevent unwanted pregnancies, we encourage you to seek information and services to the nearest health facility. Then 3 is we encourage the healthcare providers, private, public, and NGO, to have safe spaces for young people. That will encourage young people to reach out to the facilities and have services to continue. And then I would also ask the religious leaders, the cultural leaders to join in this, let me call it a fight. We must fight for the rights of young people.
All right. Anne Charimpa is the Manager of Safe Motherhood at RHU. Let's bring in the Executive Director, Jackson Okwekwal. So let's talk about this other fact. More young teenagers are using more contraceptives between the ages of 14 to 19 than their counterparts who are above 25. What could be the big problem here? And what message do you have for our young people watching right now as we close this conversation?
Yeah, it's an interesting actually because it shows that our young people are getting empowered every day. Evidence has shown that young people who have good information, adequate information,
or engaging
accurate,
more in sexual acts than their older counterparts?
Not at all, not at all.
Oh.
Not at all.
They know better.
They know better. And they are safer.
Indeed.
Actually, those who don't have access to this useful information, they end up making mistakes.
Indeed.
And that is why children in the other countries where things are okay, it's because of information. Information is power.
Indeed.
So one of the recommendations is that let's take advantage of this curriculum.
Indeed.
Many young people are now in school. Let's reach them out there. 2, let's be open as a country. Let's not bury our heads under the sun.
Indeed.
As a parent, let those young people abstain. But for those who are sexually active, it is naive to be sexually active and not to use a family planning method. I want to mention about a wonder contraceptive, and that's the emergency pill, which works for young people. They make mistakes because most of the sex is unplanned, but they have a second chance.
We've
to
heard
prevent
that these
pregnancy.
pills might cause infertility. Is this true?
Not at all. Those are the misconceptions. I want to mention that RHU, because of this lockdown, has established an intelligence app called Ask RHU. You will ask a question about contraception, STIs, and you will get the answers.
So contraceptions are hugely safe. In a nutshell, Charles Musana, recommendations to our young people who are watching this show before I let you go.
Thank you so much. It's so simple. As my 2 colleagues have said,
Indeed.
you're young, you need to concentrate on your education. So abstain from sex. But dear parents, if you have a child, it's your responsibility to take care of your children. So if they are already sexually active, kindly encourage them to use contraceptives to delay the onset of childbearing. Or if they are married and already having children, encourage them to use contraceptives to appropriately space their children. We thank you, and then on a broader perspective after the COVID-19 pandemic, we should ensure that we keep girls in school until completion, and we should promote technical and vocational education to enable our country harness the demographic dividend. We should remember that adolescents are critical to whatever we do as a country. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Charles Musana. And with that, we've come to the end of this conversation. Many thanks to Charles Musana, the Public Relations Officer for National Population Council. We also had Anne Charimpa. She is the Manager Safe Motherhood, working with Reproductive Health Uganda. And the ED himself, the Executive Director of Reproductive Health Uganda, Mr. Chikweko Jackson, who had actually made it to the studio. And thank you very much. I've been looking for you for the last 2 years. I'm glad you came around. And Charles Musana, for the last 8 years. I'm glad I could see you today. And to you, Claire Kagaju from Fort Portal, thank you very much for actually giving us your 2 cents on this very, very, very beautiful conversation. My name is Rami Busiku. Of course, we are preparing NTV at 1. Do look out for that. Good afternoon.